attention because the topic was, I mean, the topic itself was pretty good, but also the list was pretty phenomenal as well. So the website itself is called dadlife.com. And it was just this really cool list. And obviously, we don't have the time to go through all 101 tips. I might do a part two to this at some point, but there were some ones that stood out to me. And when I sent the list to Brother Hummel, like he was like, okay, so there's some that stand out to me too. And so I'll let you kick it off, bro. But what was one of the things that on this list that stood out to you and why?
Absolutely. So we had a couple after I had looked. I didn't want to look at your list and then make my list. I wanted to kind of make my list before and then kind of send it over to you and
Yeah,
then to see where there was some overlap. And we did have some of the
yeah,
same things that really stuck out to us. One of the things that I thought was interesting for me was no matter how tough it gets,
yes,
it's
sir.
100% worth it. So, there's going to be times where it's going to be hard, where you're going to think to yourself, like, what was I thinking getting into this? This
Yeah,
isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. My wife and I, we had our first child, and I was 35. No way, that can't be right. I was 34, and she was about to be like
yeah,
31 or whatnot, just turned 31, and I had just turned 34. And one of the things that we talked about was, it's like, man, people they'll coach you for marriage and all this, but no one really told us what we were getting into when we were having kids and how much of a
yeah, bro.
game changer it was going to be for us.
Yeah,
It was a game changer. Like, I mean, it was like, whoa, okay, I knew about dirty diapers, I knew about this and that, but I didn't know that I was gonna have a
yeah,
baby that would be screaming and crying and getting in my face and yelling at me, and it's like, "What in the world? What spirit did you get possessed with that's making you act like this?"
yeah,
So, that's one of those things where you have to constantly remind yourself, it's hard right now, but this is gonna be
yeah,
100% worth all the sleepless nights, all the crying, all the
yeah,
screaming, all the poopy diapers. Everything's going to be worth it all when you're on the verge of getting ready to lose your mind. It's
yeah,
like, you know what? This is going to be worth it all. And I think about that. And I've learned so much about the Lord through being a father. When I think about, no matter how tough it gets, it's going to be worth it all. Dealing with a physical, natural baby, I think
sir.
about that in the spirit as well. When we're dealing with people that are just coming to the Lord and who are new babes in Christ, and all the issues that we have to deal with,
Yeah,
and the diapers that need to be changed, and we hear them crying, and they want to
yep,
wake us up in the middle of the night. But it's all going to be
100%.
worth it.
Yeah,
100%. We're not going to have any regrets once we see these babes mature into well-being adults that are able to walk on their own and speak and have their
it is.
mind. It's
It
going to be worth
definitely
it
is,
all.
man. I know, both of us are kind of in our early stages of being dads. You have two boys, um, and then my wife and I, we have five, two boys, three girls, and what I think probably one of the things that kind of motivates me in that is that I remember my conversations with my mom, um, and as I got older, conversations with my dad, and just how that dynamic has affected me as a grown man now, looking at my own children, and how it's pushed me to
Mm,
be a better parent. And I had great parents. I mean, like I had really good parents. And so when I say this, it's not a knock on my parents, but to be a better parent than my parents were,
right.
um, in the sense of trying my best to just make sure that I'm there in every respect of the way. Like my dad was in the military, and so that's and again, no knock to him. I appreciate his service. I appreciate the time he put in. He did what he needed to do for our family, and he was a loving father. But because he was in the military, he wasn't there a lot. So one of the things that
Mm,
my wife and I were talking about one time was that I was like, man, I said, I don't remember being like this with my dad. And she's like, well, that's because your dad wasn't there all the time. And I was like, this is true. Like my kids have a different dynamic with me because of that, but
right.
it's definitely gonna be worth it when we get done. And our children are graduating, and Lord Terry, Lord don't come back before then. You know, our kids
Right.
graduating, getting married, having families of their own. I'm excited for what God's going to do in our kids' lives. So I know for me, one of the things that jumped out was actually one of the first ones, and it said, "You'll be swept up in big changes as a first-time dad. Don't forget to enjoy the little moments." And it kind of ties into what you were talking about. Whereas, there's just so much going on, and the cool thing is too, like a lot of these principles and tips, while they're for new dads, they apply to dads in all stages, right? Because, the dad who has
Absolutely.
teenagers, the dad who has preteens, the dad who, he's on his seventh child, not his first child. There's always big changes coming. There's always something
Mm,
happening. Somebody's growing a tooth, somebody's walking, somebody's spelling, somebody's saying their first word, somebody's going to school, somebody like, there's always these big changes, and I know for me, it's
right.
been, sometimes it's you look at the big change and you go, "Wow, there's so much to get done." Like, when my son started, kindergarten this year,
Mm,
and, we decided to homeschool, going through a co-op, and, looking at it and going, it's easy to focus on, "Okay, so how much is this gonna cost? What is that gonna do to my schedule? How is this gonna affect my wife's schedule?"
right.
And to get caught up in the adult side of things versus being like, "Hey, okay, so my son's about to go to kindergarten, first day of school. Let me make sure that when I get home and I get off, I can sit down with him and be like, "Hey, how was it? Did you like it?" And one of the things my wife helped
Sh-
me with, is she instituted what we call a tag in, where, we sit down at the dinner table and she's like, "Okay, tell daddy about your day." And, it's gotten to the point where my kids are like, "Hey, dad, how was your day?"
Mm,
And they sit there and actually listen, and they don't, I mean, they may not understand everything
nice.
that's happening, right? I can't explain to them everything that happened in my day, but they wanna know if it's a good day.
Right.
Did I have a good day? Did I have,
Right.
was it a bad day? Was it a really tough day? I'm doing some training for work now, and so I'm like, "Hey, Dad's got homework," and they're like, "Homework? You got homework?" And, trying to explain to them, "Yeah, daddy's got homework." But if you're, sometimes we can get so caught up again in just the big picture things and forget the small moments and making sure we make those count.
No, that's so true. That's tremendous. And by you being able to do that, you're kind of teaching them as well. It's like, hey, these things that you're learning now, they carry with you throughout your whole life. So even as you're going and you're having homework now, when you get
Yep.
older, you're still gonna have to come
Yeah.
back and you're still gonna have homework. So we gotta learn to tackle these disciplines now and go ahead and eat the frog early
Yeah.
so we can get it out the way and still enjoy the rest of
Yep.
our
This is very
evening and
true.
have a great life.
What was something else that stood out for you?
So another one that I thought was really, really good, and I think it was on both of our lists, was don't be
Yes, sir.
tempted by unnecessary stuff. And when you think about that, it's one of those things where that can go in
Yeah.
so many different ways. Like there's things that you see that you're like, oh, I need to get this, and I got to make sure I know how to do this, and I got to have this. And you start thinking about all these additional
Yeah.
things that aren't really necessary. It's not essential for you to be able to be a good dad. It's like, oh man, I remember when we first had our firstborn, and Gabriel he just turned 4 this past December in
Yeah.
2022. So when I think about him and I think about the things that we had with him, man, we had like diaper wipe warmers and then all sorts of stuff. When our second born came, he had cold shock because he ain't getting no he ain't getting no wipe warmer. No, he's getting that
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
on his
Yeah.
tush cold. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, you getting wiped down, it's gonna be cold. But then so there's like certain things that's like, okay, well, we gotta
Yeah.
do this, we gotta make sure we do this. And a lot of the things that you're thinking are super important
Yeah.
really are just unnecessary. Like there's some things that you can do and you can get distracted, like, well, I gotta make
Yeah.
sure I do this and I gotta do that.
Yep.
And you start to stress things that
Yeah.
really they're not even necessary. Like I don't need to be worried about this. And that was one of the things when I think back to when I first became a dad, even now,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I can go ahead and enjoy this and not have to stress about all these different things that are trying to
Yeah.
tempt me to avert my attention. And I think about that, especially just becoming a new dad, like there's a temptation. Okay, well, I've got to work longer hours. I remember when my firstborn son, I'm in sales. So when my firstborn came, I was thinking like, okay, I'm about to go get it. I'm going to conquer the world. I'm going to make a
Yeah.
lot of money so I can support my family. But the reality of the situation was that when my son came, I
Yeah.
wanted to be at work less because I wanted to be able to be home so I could see my
Yeah.
children getting raised up. And there was another scenario that happened when my second born came into the world, Gideon. He came in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. You know, it was one of them crazy
Yeah.
situations, as you know, so we sat there, and there was an opportunity for me to get a raise in my job, and it was a significant raise. It was going to double
Wow.
what I was bringing home every year. So
Yeah.
I mean, it was a lot of money. But the problem was I was going to have to travel through 5 different states. I was going
Yeah.
to be on the road a lot, and while the money was nice, it was
Yeah.
unnecessary because we weren't struggling. I wasn't in a place. It would have been cool to have that comfort. We could have probably hired this person, or we could have
Right.
done this, put our kids here, whatever. But how much more would my kids have rather had their dad
Yeah.
home? And I remember praying about it, and I remember the Lord asking me a question. He said, "John,
Mhm.
how much is your
Bro.
family worth?" Woo! I sat there, and then it's one of those things where we allow things to tempt us beyond
Yeah.
where they really need to be tempting us. We'll hear the voice of God speak, but then we'll start to rationalize, well, was
Yeah.
that really God, or was that just me? So one night I was out walking, and as I'm on a walk, I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, open up some doors for me to meet some people so I can have a spiritual conversation with them, so that we can reach out to them, shine
Right.
your light, and introduce them to you. So as I'm praying, I'm sitting there walking, and then there was a family that I had been witnessing to for trying to build a relationship for a couple months. I hadn't seen them in like maybe 6 weeks. And as I was walking, I started praying for that family. It's like, Lord, I don't know where they've been. And as I was walking my normal course, I felt
Mm.
the Lord tell me to turn left. And I'm like, that's silly. Like, why would I
Yeah.
turn left right here? This don't make no sense. And I kept feeling it so strong that I was like, you know what? If this is the
Right.
Lord, I want to obey his voice. Even though it
Yeah.
don't make sense, I'm going to go ahead and obey it. So I ended up turning left. I went down the road. And as I was walking down the road, I see a truck backing up into the driveway of where that family
Wow.
lived that I had just been praying
Wow.
about, that I hadn't seen in 6 weeks. And I'm like, surely that's not them. And then as I get closer, they hop out, and they're like, John, this is crazy. You won't believe it. We were
Wow.
literally just talking about you. I asked my wife if she's seen you, and she was like, I haven't seen you. And look, I looked up, I was like, man, there's John right there. And it was one of those things I was
Yes,
like, yeah,
sir.
man, this is a God encounter right here. They start laughing. I ended up having my longest conversation with that
Wow.
guy at that moment right then. And I mean, since then, we've been able
Yeah.
to build relationships with them. So I say all that to say, as soon as that happened, I left them. Man, it was great talking. Let's get together. I start walking back. The Lord speaks to me and says, John, you know my voice.
Mhm.
You just have to listen. The same voice that spoke to you and told you to turn left is the same voice that's telling you
Mhm.
not to take this job.
Bro.
Listen to me. It was like, woo. It was so powerful. Man,
Wow.
I can feel goosebumps even now. And it's like, Lord, I was allowing
Yeah.
myself to be tempted by
Yeah.
something that was going to be
Yeah.
nice, but it was not necessary. It was not going to help me be a better father. If anything, it was going to put more strain on my wife. It was going to put more strain on my children. They would have had more things, but they wouldn't have had their father, and their
Yes,
father
sir.
was the more necessary
Yes,
thing
sir.
to be present in the moment. So it
Wow.
was one of those things. It's like, man, Lord, help me not to be tempted by things that are unnecessary, even if it's something that in my
Yeah.
flesh I might think is necessary, when in
Yeah.
reality it's nothing. It's all just wood, hay, and stubble. I can't take it with me. Well, I can invest in my children, be here, learn how to budget better, and it's going to pay off far
Yes,
greater
sir.
with more
Wow.
dividends in the long.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I think probably it's probably one of the biggest things as parents that we deal with. Um, and I know, like, moms deal with it too, but sometimes as dads, we can deal with it because, in that position, you may be like, hey, maybe there's a truck you've been looking at, or there's like a vacation you've been wanting to take the family on, or you saw somebody else who like had something really cool and really nice. You're like, you know what? If I take this job, I can get that thing that I want. And you know, and I've also seen like where
Right.
parents allow unnecessary stuff like into their kids, and I'll talk about this here in a minute. But like I've seen families who are like, "Hey, my kid needs to be in,
Mm,
in every single sport," or every single after school activity, and it's like, if you're really gonna raise your child and you're really gonna disciple your child,
Right.
like, they have to learn they can't be involved in everything. They gotta learn to pick and choose. And as a parent, do you really want your child involved in every single thing they can be involved in, or do you want them to learn how to listen for the voice of God, teach them to say, "Hey, we're gonna pray about this before you go join this." There may be nothing wrong with it on the outside, but let's pray about it. Let's see what's going on. And there's just, I mean, kids having phones too early, people like just there's unnecessary stuff in life, and we're seeing. I mean, just hop on Amazon and they will try to sell you a bunch of unnecessary stuff. And I like Amazon, but you know what I mean. Like if you're not careful, you'll walk away having spent a couple $100 on stuff that you don't need to buy. It just looked cool. You know what I mean?
It's the
It's like
truth.
the person who goes in Walmart and the grocery shop and they say don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry because you'll walk out with unnecessary stuff. You know.
It's the truth, bro. I feel attacked. Go ahead. It's the truth.
Bro, I mean, it's one of those things.
Yes,
I'm that
yes,
person
bro.
who like back before even well, I'll say this, even after we got married, like there were times my wife was like, "What else did you buy on Amazon?" And I'm like, um, they were having a sale. Like me and my wife, like we both like to shop, and that's a bad thing. Like you're supposed to have a person who's like Uber saver, and we're both kind of like, "Oh, that's nice," and it's on sale. Um Not that
Justification.
I n not that I need it,
It's
not that
justified,
I
about to
need
be
it, but you know what I'm
sanctified.
saying? And it can it can just be interesting, but it's that temptation to buy stuff, even for the podcast, right? There's a temptation to go out and buy a $700 camera because that's the camera everybody says you need to use for YouTube, right? Um, or to go spend 4 or $500 to set up a studio because that's what everybody says you need in order to be good on YouTube. And realizing that, you know, pull it back when it comes, if it comes, and being content. Paul said, I've learned
Mhm.
to be content.
Right,
He wasn't looking for every situation to be the best situation, but he said, I've learned how to be content. So,
right.
one of the things that, one of the things
No,
that
it's
jumped
so
out to
true.
me, kind of in connection with, um, unnecessary stuff. It probably hit me the most, especially after. I don't know if you've seen. Have you seen that video of the predator? They did an interview with a guy who went to jail for some stuff he did to kids. So
Mm-mm.
obviously, I wouldn't say watch it with your kids around. But there's a podcast, the PBD podcast, and they did a snippet where they watched part of this interview. And one of the things that this guy said that he was looking for when he was, you know, after kids, after boys, was that he looked for a home where the father was not a threat and where the kids seemed like
Mm.
they didn't have anybody that they would tell or talk to. And the guy was
Wow.
apparently like a referee for like a little league, and so like he had access to kids. And he would, he could pick out, hey, that single mom seems like she's struggling. Seems like, she doesn't have the wherewithal to kind of, be there. And so he would pose as like a
Mm.
good male figure for the boy to hang out with. And it's just, bro, it will make your blood boil, like absolutely boil. But it reminded me of this tip that was on this thing. And again, this is for new fathers. This list was for new fathers, but I was like, there's some stuff on here that's just so good. It's not just for new dads. And it was the fifth
Right.
one, and it says the doorbell is not your friend.
Mhm.
You may want to consider limiting any visitors for the first week or so, and also creating a sign for the door to save the doorbell waking any of you up while you deserve or while you're napping. And when I read that, I was like, as a dad, that mandate, that principle never goes away. Like the doorbell's not your friend. Yeah, when you have a new baby, the doorbell is not
Right.
your friend because that child needs sleep, mommy needs sleep, you need some sleep. Um, everybody in that house needs some sleep because a kid,
Mhm.
like we were talking about earlier before, It changes the whole dynamic of, you know, the relationship in the house. But as a father, we have to recognize the doorbell is not our friend in that everybody who comes to the door doesn't need access to our house. Everybody who comes to the door, and I don't
So
mean the
good.
door as in our physical door only, I mean every program that comes up on the new streaming system, whether that's, Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, whatever, every program doesn't need access to my house. Every friend that or every kid that wants to befriend my
Mm,
friend or my son or my daughter doesn't need access to my kid. Every person who wants to talk to my wife
right.
doesn't need access to my wife. Everybody who wants to be in a relationship with me as a friend doesn't need access to me. And so, as a father, it goes beyond just the actual doorbell waking you up, but it's okay. So, how do I, as the head of my household, and the term that I loved is the book that I read, Family Shepherds, as a shepherd of my family. How do I guard the door, guard my home from people and things trying to get into my home, to change the atmosphere of my home, to take advantage of my children, to take advantage of my wife, to take advantage of me, to take advantage of our time, to take advantage of our devotion with God. Like, how do I make
Right.
sure that I'm not just allowing everything that wants to get in? And being vigilant as a husband
Mm,
to be a threat, right? One of the things that I know for us that happened was early on, and I won't say which child it was, but early on, one of our kids had two or three situations where I believe it was a spiritual attack. And I know there are people who are like, "Ooh, you're one of the," but hear me out, right? So their infant hadn't been in anything, hadn't done anything. Um, their baby, right? And we're laying in bed, and just out of nowhere, I mean, like blood curdling, screaming, crying. And so, of course, my wife hops up and she's thinking, gas. She's thinking they got a burp, like something's like really bothering the baby really bad. And, but it
right.
doesn't stop. They don't have a temperature. They're not like when you hold them or you push on something, they don't cry more. So it's not like they broke something or, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't that type of situation. They're just like screaming. And finally, I felt this like pray, like this impression, pray. And so I started to pray. And then as I began to pray, like there was like this, it was, I want to say it was a battle, right? Because it was like this pushing down of the prayer. And what I mean by that is like as I was praying, I was kind of getting louder. Like there was this like, why would you want to get louder? Like why would you want to get more intense? Like just pray a little prayer and roll over. Like that kind
Mm,
of like resistance, right? And so I'm praying and my wife is praying, and finally like I just go into worship and we're just worshiping and praying, and finally it just breaks. Like literally it breaks and he stops crying. It just done. And it was just like, what just happened? Like we both were looking at each other like, what was that?
right.
And it's happened a couple other times. And I know like the enemy sees things before we ever see them. He sees that we have giftings and callings before we ever see them. And so I kind of lean towards that. But as a father, right, it could have been, I was like, well, I'll let my wife deal with that. Right. And sometimes we can look at things and say, well, my wife's prayer is more powerful than my prayer. My wife knows how to connect with God more than or quicker than I do. But as a husband, as a father, if I can challenge us, like that's my baby, right? And that's my wife. Why would I allow an intruder into my house, spiritual or physical, and just let my
Right.
wife go deal with it? You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like, why would I do that? And so I'm not, and
exactly.
I'm not saying this to like big me up or like, but I'm saying it as an account. Like, it happened a couple other times where it was just like, okay, like throw on your war gear, go into prayer, and don't stop until that thing snaps. Like, don't stop until that thing lifts off. Don't stop praying until you know for sure that thing is, whatever it's trying to do, you've like it's been broken in the spirit. And so, for our fathers, like I know some of you
Amen.
may be looking at me and going, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's okay. But there's some of you who know what I'm talking about and you know what that feeling is. And you haven't, you feel intimidated to step into that role as a father. and step into that role as a man who is a threat spiritually and a threat physically. And you need to step into that role. Like, you need to make it a point to say, you know what, in my house, nothing comes in my house to take advantage of my children that I don't put down either in prayer or some other way, but I'm going to put it down. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, definitely. That's so true. When Gabriel, our oldest, when he was just a little baby, he would start having like random crying fits. And I would take him in my arms and start walking, and I would start praying, and I would feel that he would calm down. So I started making up songs. One of the things that they
Yeah.
say is like also sing to your child. So, bro, I would make up songs like all day. One of the songs was walking through the house, praying through the house, believing through the house,
Yes, sir.
casting demons out. We're walking through, and that shit became like a rap song. Like we're walking through the house, pa-pa, praying through the house, pa-pa, believing through the house. We're casting demons out, and we're walking through. So I'm sitting there like patting his back, getting like a
Yes,
drum
sir.
pattern going. And then, man, next thing you know,
Yes,
bro,
sir.
it's like you go into war mode because it becomes like a cadence, and it's like, oh, this
Yeah.
is a spiritual battle for sure. And you start thinking about like, like nope, like
No.
devil, you're not gonna have my
Yeah.
children, you're not gonna have my family, because just as the doorbell's not your friend, there's like you were saying, there's so many things that we
Yes.
invite into our home that
Nope.
don't even have to ring the doorbell. You know what I'm saying? It can come on you start entertaining with Amazon Prime, and then next thing you know, you got
Yeah.
Netflix and YouTube. I sent my wife a video a couple weeks ago or so about, I don't know if it's YouTube Kids or Kids YouTube something, but they said that where children are being exposed to most pornographic content in this day and
Yeah.
time is YouTube Kids or Kids YouTube, one of those two. I don't know what it's
Yeah.
called exactly. And it blew my mind. But what they're doing is they're taking these cartoon characters and everything, and it seems like it's harmless, but then they're having them go through
Yeah.
pornographic acts and whatnot, and the
Yeah.
children are seeing it, get exposed to it. And I think about just
Yeah.
how subtle the enemy is and how he knows that if he can, I mean, we look through biblical history, we can see that it starts when they're young. If I can go ahead and kill off all these firstborn male children, if I can kill them before they grow up, then I
Yep.
don't have to worry about them being a threat. So he knows the power of the infancy that the child is in. And in his mind, he's thinking, if I can
Yes.
kill them before they mature, and if I can get my influence into them, then when they grow up, they're not going to be an
Exactly.
opponent, but they're going to be an ally. If I can go and indoctrinate them while they're still young and show them a friend on the screen who happens to be
Yep.
transgendered or this or that, then I know that when they get older,
Yep.
they're not going to contend against that
Yep.
because they're already okay with that. So it's like, and then the schools, we send our kids to a Christian school, but the things that some of the Christian teachers
Mhm.
teach them blow my mind. I'm like, what are you guys doing? I thought you were a Christian school.
Yeah.
So then you're having to contend with that, even though you didn't allow them to ring the
Mhm.
doorbell. You sent your son out there to open the
Yeah.
door, and they're getting greeted by these people. So yeah, bro, I definitely, there's a spiritual aspect and a component to it. One time, my wife and I, it was a crazy day. We just had our second born. Second changes everything all over again. So just had our second born. He was screaming. We got into an argument. I left the house, went on a walk, and I started praying. And there was so much spiritual stuff
Bro.
going on that I was unaware of. Won't even thinking about it
Yeah.
because I was so caught up in the moment that the doorbell was ringing. I was opening in doors. Sometimes we can open
Yes,
a door
sir.
just by what it is that we speak. We acknowledge the presence of what it is without even
Yeah.
acknowledging what it is. So we sit there and speak it out. And by us speaking it out, what we're actually
Yeah.
doing is
Yeah.
entertaining it, saying, come on into my house without us even realizing what it is that we're doing. And I'm just sitting here speaking and like, man, death and life are in the power of the tongue. And I start walking and praying. And as soon as I walked out my door, I start hearing some eerie music. I'm like, man, we had some crazy neighbors at the time. So I'm like, oh, they're
Yeah.
probably out there doing their thing, whatever. But it won't rap music, won't rock music. It was like some
Yeah.
eerie bells and stuff. And I'm like, what is somebody listening to? So then I turn up the street, winds picking up with intensity. And I'm not naturally like a scared guy, like, oh man, someone's about to like
Yeah.
jump me or someone's gonna come out here and rob me, you know. So I was like,
Mhm.
okay, but for whatever reason, that night I was so paranoid, I could feel like someone was physically gonna get ready to come and rob me. So I'm sitting
Yeah.
there walking, looking behind me, looking around, seeing what's going on. And then as I'm walking, I feel such a eerie presence over by this school. And I feel the Lord telling me to go and pray. And when I looked over there for a split second, I saw somebody sitting on some swings. I hear the swings moving,
Bro.
but when I look back, there's no one there. So I go walk up, come back, and the Lord's like, I need you to go back there and pray. And I'm like, Lord, this is crazy what you're asking me to do. Like, I'm not trying to be about this right now. I'm trying to just get home at this point. I'm not trying to die in the wilderness, Lord. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, man. So I turned down this one street, and my
Yeah.
pastor lives at the end of the street that I turned down. When I start turning down there and walking, the music stops and
Mm.
the wind dies down. I'm like, sweet, all right. But I can't get back to my house unless I pass back where I just walked. So I'm like, man, all right. So here we go. I'm like, Lord, you want me to go there and pray? Soon as I turn back on that street, the wind picks up and I hear the music again. I'm like,
Bro.
this is crazy, Lord. So then I end up going, I stop just short of where that street is, of where the school is. And as I start walking, I'm like, okay, Lord, I
Wow.
don't know what's going on. But right now, in the name of Jesus, and as soon as I crossed this invisible line, I could feel all of a sudden there was demonic activity, but then it was
Bro.
matched with an angelic presence that came from heaven and said, if my son is going to go ahead and face this, I'm
Yes,
going to
sir.
send every angel to back him up. And I began to go and pray. Next thing I knew, I had my hands on that fence at this Catholic school, and it was like 10:30 at night. I'm speaking in tongues, shaking the fence, casting out every devil in hell. And then the Lord spoke to me and said, the gates of hell shall
Bro.
not prevail against the church. And he was speaking to me something
Mm.
about the spirit that I was battling and what it was. And it was a spirit of fear and intimidation because all the crying and all the things that were going
Yes,
on, it
sir.
was uncharted territory. And Lord, I'm
Bro.
feeling like I'm failing as a father. I'm failing as a husband. Lord, I'm failing as a Christian. I'm failing as a disciple. Lord, and I don't. Lord, I don't want to continue to mess up. So that feeling of failure
Mm.
had a fear and intimidation that was trying to keep me in that box to where I would just give up. And then that Lord is saying, now you need to go and
Yes.
confront what it is that you're feeling so that you can deal with it effectively
Bro.
because you've been letting it in the house. So it's like, text my wife,
Yeah.
babe, we're fighting spiritual warfare. We need to go ahead and pray. Begin praying. I'm praying right now. Began to go and pray, walk through the neighborhood, prayed some more, went home, prayed. And we've had moments like that where there's been a lot of
Yeah.
uh, spiritual opposition, but what I found is when we pray, and I teach my kids because they'll be like, "Oh, I see a monster."
No.
I'm not like, "Oh, you're so cute." No, all right, you see that? I want you to know you have power. That thing has to listen. If you see a spirit, whatever it is, when you speak the name of Jesus, everything has to
Yes.
come subject under that name. Every
Yes.
principality, every power, every devil, it all has
Yes.
to listen when I speak the name of Jesus. And my kids, they pray. They'll come to me if we have a headache or
Bro.
something. They'll lay hands and it's a kid's prayer. Jesus,
Amen.
touch
Yeah.
daddy in Jesus' name. Amen. Bro, I believe in those prayers. I've seen God. They've prayed for
Yeah.
me, and boom, I start feeling better. I'm like, man, I grab them and tell them, hey, you
Yeah.
prayed for me, and Jesus healed me. I want you to know when you pray,
Yes,
Jesus
bro.
listens and he hears.
Man, you said
So,
so
so
much there,
powerful,
and
bro.
a couple of things I wanted to hit really quick. One, um, is the feeling of inadequacy. I don't know that as dads we talk about that a lot. That we struggle. Like I know we have our egos. I know we have, we deal with pride, things like that. But as fathers, and I know this may some of y'all may be like, hey, how could you even like begin to talk about this? My wife is gonna hear this and then she's gonna be like, babe, do you struggle with this? And I don't want to have to deal with it. But if we're honest, as men, we struggle with insecurity being fathers and being husbands and doing it well more than what we will ever say.
Right.
Um, and we can do a couple things with that. Like we can go into prayer, like you're talking about, like we can go into prayer. We can go and say, God, I don't know where this feeling of inadequacy is coming from, but you've entrusted me with these children. You've entrusted me with my wife. God, you've gifted these to me. And so you're going to enable me, or we can allow ourselves to go down that road of feeling inadequate and it affect how we parent, how we love our wives, because we always feel like we're not good enough. And I know we talk about women having that struggle, right? Like we know
Right.
women struggle with that idea of not being good enough or not being beautiful enough, not being whatever enough. But if we're honest, as men, as husbands and as fathers, we struggle with the same same idea in a different way. Like we struggle with the idea of being
Mm,
enough. You know, when we look at our kids and we see our kids growing up
so good.
and we see them maybe making a mistake and we see the mistake and we're like, man, wh- I know my kid's only 5, but still, like, can I teach him enough so that when he's older, he doesn't have to go down that road and he doesn't have to make those mistakes? Am I enough of a father to be able to protect my kids? Am I enough of a father to show them the right amount of love and to be there for them when they need me the most? Am I enough of a husband and a man to be there for my wife and actually be everything that she needs me to be? Like we really do struggle with that if we're honest. And we have to go back to the word of God and say, God,
100%.
our children are a heritage of the Lord. He that has find a wife findeth a good thing and attains favor of the Lord. Like we have to go back to the word and realize God's equipped us to be, if we will allow him to lead us,
Right.
he's equipped us to be amazing dads and amazing fathers. No, we may not have all the unnecessary things in the world, but we can be absolutely amazing as fathers and as husbands. And it just yeah, we have to be honest. I'm really realizing more and more. I had to have a conversation with my wife not too long ago, kind of along the same lines. She was asking me about some stuff, and I had to be honest. And I was like, "Babe, there are times that I want to fix things because I realize if I tell you, like in my head, I think if I screw
Mm,
up and I tell you that I screwed up, it might make you feel differently about me." And
mm,
she looked at me and she just began to talk to me about like how much she was, proud of me, how much she loved me, and how much she was like actually here for me. Things that I know, right? But as a man, a moment of transparency, right? As a man, there was a moment in me where it was just like, I'm trying to get this done because if I can get it done and fixed, she doesn't have to know that
right.
maybe things weren't going the right way. When in reality, what God gave her to me for was so we could go down that road together and so we could figure it out together, so we could pray
Mm,
about it together, so we could be on the same page together. And in doing that, we could see us grow into the couple that we're supposed to be, you know what I mean? So I just wanted when you said that, it just kinda hit me because it's like,
absolutely.
man, we struggle with that so much, and it's so easy to just say, "Oh, no, 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 I'm good, man. I don't struggle with that." And that's a lie. We all know as men, if you're sitting there
No,
saying,
it's
"Well, I
so
don't
true.
struggle with being enough," give it some time. Give it some time.
It's so true. That actually goes into one of those points. It was on the list, I think it was number 14, that you will
Bro.
feel guilty. And I think that that goes right in there with it. Like you're gonna feel guilty. You're gonna
Yeah,
feel like you're not a good enough father. You're gonna feel like you're messing up. You're gonna do things that you look back and you're like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that, or I wish I wouldn't have said that. I wish I would have approached that differently. I've talked to people that have,
yeah.
walked away from the faith, and I'm like, man, like what was it? What happened? And they're like, well, our
Mhm.
parents would live one way when they were at church and people would love them, but they would come home, it'd be a completely different story. And I'm like, man, I'm like, well, there's times that I get upset with my kids. I
Yeah,
might raise my voice at one of my children. I might spank my son a
yeah,
little bit too hard, harder than I should have. I'm like, man, I was like, but so let me ask you this. I said, I always go to him and I always tell him sorry. I tell him that I was wrong. If I did
yeah,
something wrong, I let them know. Daddy was wrong. I should not have done that. I'm trying to
yeah.
be more like Jesus. Forgive me. And then they're like, if our parents would have done that, we wouldn't have it
Bro,
wouldn't have been as hard of a
we
struggle
are.
for us because we're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna feel guilty. That
Yeah,
condemnation is real. Like, Lord, I've sat there and there's been times, but it all goes back to our
yeah,
upbringing. I know you said you had great parents. My dad was a former Vietnam vet, came back with a lot of drug addictions, came back with a lot of
mhm,
alcohol problems, trying to numb the pain
yeah,
from seeing his friends die and everything. I didn't understand that as a kid. I just saw a man who would love me one moment and then I feel like he would hate
yeah,
me and my mom and my brother the next moment. So I didn't understand all that. So then when I grow up, I'm like, Lord,
right,
I don't want to be that to my kids. So it's like, I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm gonna be this. I'm gonna be that. So by us seeing how
yeah,
everything was with our families, we start to fear
yeah,
that we're going to repeat
yeah,
those same things. And if we're not careful, by us having those feelings, and those fears, we can actually cause them to come to pass
yeah,
because we're fearing it and not giving it to the
yeah,
Lord, saying, Help us to grow in this area. There's things that are inside of us that the Lord will use us raising our children to reveal things
yeah,
about us that we didn't even know were in
yeah,
us because He wants to get them out of us. So it's like, Lord, help me to see what it is that I need to change. Let my children show it. I'm going to mess up, Lord. I'm going to make mistakes, but Lord, help me to overcome those. Give me grace to be a great father. Help me to see
yes,
how I
sir,
can right the wrongs that I've made where I feel like I'm being
yeah,
inadequate and I'm not measuring up. Lord, help me to be the father and
bro,
the dad that you want me to be. That's a prayer that I pray constantly. Lord,
yeah,
let me be the dad that you've called me to be. Let me be the dad that these boys need for me to be.
yeah,
And then give me grace when I'm not. Because there's going to be times that
yes,
we're
sir,
all going to fail. We're all going to fall, we're all going to come up short. But my kids, not once have they ever desired to have
yeah,
another father. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? When I don't buy them the toy at the store, it's like, oh, you still love me? Yeah. You still want me to be your dad? Yeah. My son was
yeah,
randomly, I love you,
bro,
dad. Wow. Why am I feeling so guilty? Why
yeah,
am I beating myself so
man,
bad?
there's
Beating
nothing
myself
like
up.
your kids saying, "I love you." There's nothing,
Mm,
especially if, like, you've had,
so
like, a
true.
rough day, my oldest daughter,
Hmm.
she's that one who's like that, and she will, like, I'll, like, come in, and she's like, "How's your day, dad?" It's like, "It was good." And she'll just be, like, randomly walking by and put her head on my shoulder and just be like, "I love you, dad." And I'm like, it's like it's just this feeling of like, wow, like my kid. And there may be people like, well, your kid doesn't really understand what love is. Well, they really don't understand the full intention of love, but they know what they feel towards us. And so it's just that moment. Um,
100%.
yeah. As husbands, as fathers, man, we've got to make sure that we're and I would say this too. One of the things I think that helps is having somebody that you can talk to that's not your wife and that's not someone who's necessarily in your immediate family. Um, Having a group of men
Right. No,
or a
that's true.
man that you can go talk to that you all can, the Bible says iron sharpens iron. And so does, a countenance of a friend. And so when you're looking at feeling inadequate or you're feeling guilty, go talk to an older dad. Go talk to a dad who's been in church for a while, is faithful. If you need to ask your pastor, hey, who's a good dad I can go talk to? And go have that conversation with them. Be like, hey, I'm feeling really inadequate right now. And they will begin to help you understand how to navigate that prayerfully scripturally, but how to navigate that as a husband and a father and how to make sure you kind of mitigate that and you don't allow yourself to stay there. Because it can definitely mess you up long term if you're not,
Right.
if you're not paying attention. Um
No, it's so true.
Going through, going through one of the things that caught my there were a couple more that caught my attention. One was, you'll see many different shades of poo, and I started laughing when I saw this because, if you have kids, this is true both in the sense of bowel movements, but also in the sense of mistakes your kids are gonna make, right? So, in the sense that, right,
Mm.
as a child, like my kid, we had one experience, bro, where our child, she wasn't sick. And I won't say which one it was. I said she. so it's already out there, but I've got 3 daughters, so then you gotta figure out which one. She was a baby, and, my wife was changing her, and she had, like, the most forceful bowel movement I have ever seen, bro. Like, it shot past my wife, and, like, she was changing in the kitchen, and was, like, all of the
Mm,
cabinets just, like a straight geyser, bro, and, and it's true, like, when we look like, our kids, depending on how they're feeling, right? I mean, it could be a mess running down their legs, and they had a clean diaper 1 second, and the next second, like, it's all running down their legs, and you're like, "What just happened? You have a diaper on."
right,
Or it could be, like, those
right.
times where, they've been eating their veggies good, and all of a sudden, like, like, "Hey, come look at this."
Mm,
And as I
right.
looked at that, I was like, it's
100%.
true both in that sense, but also, if you're looking at, you know, poop being a mistake, right? You're gonna see a whole lot of different mistakes in all different shapes, colors, sizes. Um, your kids are gonna make some
So
mistakes,
true.
and it's expected, right? And that's, I think, probably for me, one of the things that I have had to work on me for, another moment of being transparent, is being, because I see the mistake and I see where this mistake can lead, I automatically can sometimes jump to worst case scenario, meaning, your kid pushes your other kid, right? And you and your brain, like, because you want to be protecting and you want to be there for your kid, you want to kind of help them navigate life, it can almost jump to like full on fight, right? Like they're about to have a full on fight. And so you react as if the worst case scenario has happened versus being like, hey, all right, so let's look at this. We don't push, we protect, we keep, we don't mess up. Or no, you're walking down the hallway and you notice you have artwork on your wall that you've not seen before because you didn't buy it or hang it up. It's just on your wall. And you're like, what do you, I pay for this
So
house?
true.
What are you doing to my house? And but really, and as our kids get older and looking back in my own life, like one of the things I appreciate about my mom and dad is their ability to see our errors and mistakes and help us navigate it,
Mm,
and not look at it as it being foreign and being just this, oh, you made a mistake, and so we're gonna throw the baby and the bathwater out. Like, okay, so you made a mistake. Like, let's navigate this. Like, not that I didn't get in trouble, not that I didn't get disciplined, but there was
right.
always a learning with it. It was always, trying to figure out, okay, so what are you gonna do next? And I think as fathers, we have to be willing, especially if you're a newer dad, be willing to look at mistakes and be okay with it. Not the mistake itself, but being okay with the fact that your kids are going to make errors and make mistakes. And poo comes in all colors and sizes. Like I said, just how it is.
No, it's so true. That's 100% true. I think, my sons, they sometimes will drive me up a wall. And it's like, what in the world? Like, we were playing a board game a couple weeks ago, and we had
Yeah.
some of the young people over from the church, and one of them was like, "Mommy, Daddy, I need you to come in here because we hadn't heard the kids in a while. And when the kids go
Most of the
silent,
time, it's
it's not
not.
always a good thing." You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh snap, yo, these
Yeah.
kids are mad quiet right now. What's going on? Like, okay, I'll go check on them. All right, thanks. Mommy, Daddy, you need to come in here. Man, we go in there. These jokers had gotten up in the bathroom, got on the vanity. I mean, they had
Bro.
like toilet paper, like paper mache things going on. They were painting on the mirror. Water was everywhere. They were
Yeah.
both completely soaked. Like they were trying to get infant baptism as part of our belief system. I'm like, and I couldn't do nothing to sit there. I had to walk away, laugh, and then I get my phone out and take a picture because I'm like, this is too good. You know what I'm saying? Like this is
Yeah.
great. It's like, man, this is one of those memorable
Yeah.
moments. Like this is wonderful. I love this. All right, guys, get out now. You're all wet. You gotta get new
Yeah.
bedclothes on. Okay, now we gotta do this. We gotta
Yeah.
clean this up. Oh, come on, get this towel, do this. But it was that was a great one of them great moments. It's like, man, like what in the world just took
Right.
place? But that's where that one thing comes into play where it's like,
Yes, sir.
hey, you're gonna make some mistakes, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna make some bad decisions, but that's gonna be all right because they make great
Yes,
pictures,
that
and it's the
that
truth.
was a great
You'll make
line,
some
bro.
you'll make some bad decisions. Yeah, I loved it. Like there's bad decisions that you're gonna make. You know, I bought
Mm,
both my kids boxing gloves. You're talking about trying to teach them not to push. I'm trying to teach them how to throw a good punch. You know what I'm saying? Like, and there's times, bro, they'll sit there, man, and next thing you know, I start hearing Rocky music playing in my head. Dun, 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 dun. It's like, yo, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, keep them hands up. All right, when you throw, you come back. You know what I'm saying? So it's like one of those things like, okay. And then next thing you know, I got my phone out and I'm just sitting here, oh, you
yeah.
guys are having so much fun. This is so cute. And then, man, one of them throws a punch. The other one comes up, blocks it, and comes back with a nice hip into it and everything. Nice rotated little hook shot hits him in the body, and it's like, whoa, that was nice. Ah, are you okay? Are you okay? That was really good though. We have to understand what just happened here, guys. You know what I'm saying? Like you just took
Oh
what
my
daddy taught
god.
you and you put it into play, and you're gonna see how good this really does work. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, oh man, that was probably not the best decision to do. But man, that's gonna be a great picture
Yeah.
later on in life. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, we're gonna make mistakes. Some of these aren't gonna be the best decision. Like, like, okay,
Yeah.
you can have some candy and you can eat a little bit of this, and you look back and you're like, where's the rest of the candy? I ate it. You ate the
Yeah.
whole bag? Oh my goodness. So yeah, bro, there's those moments where it's like,
That's
"Uh-oh,"
hilarious, bro.
but it's all good. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes things that we think
Yeah.
are huge really aren't as big as we think they are. And once we can see that, we can start to
Yeah.
enjoy those moments a little bit more instead of being so stressed out. It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, I can't believe this happened." It's like, chill, calm down. This is
Yeah.
bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. It's all good. Let's just find the humor in this,
Yeah.
and let's just keep on moving,
That's
keep on
funny, bro.
strolling. It's gonna be good.
That's hilarious because it's true. Things like that happen, and the dad side knows is like,
It is true,
"Ooh,
bro.
that your mom, I'm gonna have to explain that to your mom, but just so you know, that was a good job."
That was great. That was a good rib shot. Yes, son.
Ah,
You gotta put a little bit more hip in it and get that. When you
funny.
chop it up, boy,
That's
you will
funny.
start breaking some bones. So, but don't do that. Don't do that unless you have to. If you're getting attacked by somebody and you have to defend.
Absolutely.
Absolutely have to defend yourself after you've prayed. Then you can do what you gotta do with
Not
that
till
hip
then.
turn. But don't do it
Oh,
until
that's
then.
funny.
Yeah, it was a bad decision, but it made a great picture.
Oh, that's hilarious, bro. Um, the last 2 I had I wanted to talk about, kinda go together, right? So, it was number 13 and number 30, and, number 30, I'll
Mhm.
read that one first, and then I'll read number 13. But number 30 was, "You're the king of house chores. If you didn't do many house chores before, you'll now be hoovering, washing, and cooking a cooking machine." And, the other one, which I think ties
Mm.
into this really well, um, and I know it's for some of y'all, it might be a little awkward, but I think it ties in really well. It says, "You may see a lot of boob, but it's not for you. Focus on being the best helper possible, and you'll have them back in no time." But as dads, I think one of the things I've noticed with like younger dads that I've talked to and stuff, there can be this, especially if they never have done house chores before or they've never done like work around the house. There's some people I
Right.
know that are absolutely opposed to doing work around the house. And it's like, bro, first, like you might be able to get away with that depending on who you married. You might be able to get away with that um, from the standpoint of like when you first get married, you don't have kids. Like it might be your wife is like, you know what? The house is my domain. I want it to look a certain way. Don't touch anything. But I promise you, when kids come
Mhm.
along, that attitude doesn't remain the same because if
Mm,
she's taking care of the kid, she especially if she's working, and I know some people are like, well, well, my wife stays at home. She's still working. Like she's still got a full-time job taking care of the house, cooking, cleaning, like all that stuff.
100%.
And so if your thought process is, well, that's her stuff. I work outside the home, I'll come home and then I just chill. The problem with that is, well, there's a couple problems with that. One is you're going to drain your wife, right? And she's going to you're gonna want affection from her, and she's not gonna have any affection to give you because she's drained it working, cleaning, taking care of the kids, right? So, especially if you're a guy,
Mm,
it goes back to the 13, right? So, especially if you're a guy who physical intimacy is something for you that is a big thing for you, like you need to find ways to help out around the house. Find ways to be like, okay, so
so good.
you cooked, I'll do dishes, or hey, I'll take care of the kids tonight. I'll give them baths, I'll get them in bed. Or hey, don't even say anything, just go take care of stuff, right? I will give this little disclaimer. Make sure you talk to your wife about how she prefers things to be taken care of first. Because I know me me and my wife, the first actual real argument we had was around, loading the dishwasher, and that may sound trivial, but it was a very deep discussion around how she liked dishwashers loaded and dishes washed versus how I was used to doing them, right? And so, like, there was a moment where we had to kind of find common ground. It was like, "Okay, so this conversation is not worth us having an argument over, so we'll just do it your way, like, that's okay." And you have to be willing because normally, like, most of the time, the wife is the one who is taking care of the house. And so she has a certain way she likes things done. She has a certain way she wants things placed. And so if you come in and you're trying to help,
Right.
like if you don't know how she wants that done, then you can literally make her have to work more because you didn't ask. So be humble, go ask, right? How do you need this done? How do you like that done? How do you prefer that to be done? But what that does is
Right.
allow you to be able to connect with, like, if you like going on dates, if y'all want to go on date, you can't really go on a date if you're not helping her around the house and she doesn't feel up to it because she didn't have the energy. You're like, hey, let's go for a walk, or hey, let's go out to go eat some dinner. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. And she's like, babe, I'm drained. Like, I don't have anything to give. Right. And it might be because you aren't
Mm,
helping. So become the king of chores in your house. It doesn't mean you're a house slave. It doesn't mean that you're
so
ball
good.
and chain. It means you're helping your helpmeet accomplish what you need to accomplish as a team, not as, well, wife, you go do this and then I'll go do the manly things. Like help around the house, clean bathrooms, dust, put things away, clean up after the kids if the kids are in bed, things like that. And then of
Right.
course 13 kind of ties into that because, as especially if your wife is um breastfeeding when you have younger kids, um there's gonna be times that you're needing her or wanting her, and you're going to have to be okay not having her in the moment because she's giving everything she's got to the kid. You can't allow jealousy to come over. You can't be like, "Hey, you gotta spend time with me too." Like, she knows that, right? And she knows that you need her time and attention. But in that, especially in the early phases, like, you've gotta be willing to allow your wife to be a mother and take care of those children, right? Like, she's going to come
Mhm.
back to you. She's not gonna run away with your kids. Prayerfully, she's not gonna run away
Right.
with your kids. But it's not gonna be a situation where you're gonna have to, like, worry about that. But if you're able to do the first thing, which is help her out around the house and be there for her, and pour into her, be there and take care of things, cook dinner on occasion, take the kids out. If you got multiple kids and your wife is just like tired, take those kids out somewhere. Like, go take them to the park, take them to something, give her some time, give her some space, and allow her to build up herself again. And so that you guys can be the couple that maybe you both want to be, but
Mhm.
maybe she can't give you because she's just so tired.
So good. Absolutely. And, Another thing about that is if you are not sensitive to what it is that's having to happen, and you try to
bro.
put blame on your wife for uh, not bringing those needs, then one, your wife already knows that she's not able to be there for you as much as one you
Yeah,
like her to, and as much as she wants to be. She knows that. So if you sit there and like
yeah,
try to put guilt on her, then all you're going to do is tear down her image, where she already feels like she's a horrible wife, and she's already
yeah.
struggling thinking that she's not a great mom. And now I'm failing at helping my husband with physical intimacy. She's just going to have an image that's getting torn down more and more and
Yes,
more,
sir.
and it's more strain on her brain. So you're
Yeah,
definitely not helping the situation. So I always think about Joseph and Mary. When Joseph was taking Mary, she was still pregnant with child. He saw what was inside of her, and he went ahead and he exalted her and lifted her up onto another level to
bro.
make her journey a little bit lighter until they got to
Mm,
where they were going. And you got to realize that it's a journey, and you got to think about
yeah,
what it is that your wife possesses. First off, she went and allowed her body to physically change
yeah,
so that she could bear your children. And now, because you're not getting certain needs met, you're going to try to put guilt and
yeah,
blame
bro.
on her and make her feel shameful.
Yes, sir.
Man, that's repent worthy. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like, okay, go ahead and hit your knees and pray and seek Jesus and talk to him and see what
Musicians
he's
come.
speaking to you about this, because there's some issues inside of our heart. Yes, thank you, Lord. Yes, Jesus. But
Wow,
it's so true
man.
though. So
Well,
true.
bro, as we were looking at wrapping up here, was there any other ones that kind of jumped out to you that you wanted to cover and look at?
There was the last one that I would hit on, and it seems so simplistic and so, like, why would you even say that, is the burping one. And I think about burping and how you have to become a master at being able to burp your
Mm,
child. And I think about that from a physical standpoint. Yeah, you got to
yeah,
burp them, help them get relief. But when I think about it, that comes up even later on in life, when our children get to a point where they have something that they have taken
bro.
in that is causing them pain, and we've got to be there to be able to get whatever it is that's in them out, even if they don't
Mm,
know what it is that they need to get out. And my son hasn't been burped in a very long time, but I still will go through a burping process with him because I see there's something in him. One night we were at church and he was sitting there acting up like crazy and having an attitude and whining. And I got to the car and I'm like, son, we're not
yeah,
leaving until you tell me what's wrong. I got out the car, walked around, got by his car
yeah,
seat, and I looked at him, not in a mean way, but in an endearing, empathetic way, like, son,
yeah,
I'm dad. Tell me what's wrong. What's wrong, son? I know something's bothering you. And he didn't want to tell me. And it's like, you
yeah.
don't have to be afraid. You're not going to get in trouble. What's going on? What happened? And then he told me somebody ended up getting a prize. My son was supposed to get a prize, but they didn't have it. And they were like, well, we'll give you a prize later.
Yeah,
But then the other gentleman got a prize. And it broke my son's
bro.
heart. And he began weeping and crying. And I'm like, man. So I just held him. But
Mm,
once he got that burp out, he
yeah,
felt a lot better. His attitude changed. And there's things that are going to happen that our kids want to keep inside because maybe they feel ashamed. Maybe they feel like, oh, this is silly that I'm even feeling this way. They don't know what it is that they've ingested, but they've taken a little piece
yeah,
of life, got it inside of their system, and it's hard for them to get it to go down so that they can digest it. So it sticks there in their chest, becomes a weight, and it creates pain. And we got to be able to learn how we
bro,
can burp it out of them so that they get whatever it is on the inside and get it outside. So now healing can start to take
bro.
place and it doesn't
That is
become a
so good.
serious issue.
That is so good.
Yeah, absolutely. If I had anything to say to the fathers,
Yeah,
I just try to say, just be encouraged. No matter what it is, you may not be
yes,
perfect, but if you're present, you're making a difference. I had looked up some statistics, and it was showing that children that don't have fathers in their homes are 5 times more
bro.
likely to be at risk for poverty. They're more likely to have behavioral problems. They're 2 times the greater risk of infant
Wow.
or mortality, to die as an infant, just
bro,
because the father is not there in the home. Their days of life are four times higher for those with fathers that are there than
bro,
those who are absent from their homes. They're more likely, if you don't have a father in your home, you're more likely to go to prison. You're more likely to get pregnant as a teen,
yeah,
just from the father being present in the home. It doesn't even say
just
for the
there,
father to be a good father, great father present, just from him being there. His
yeah,
presence, though he's not perfect,
yeah,
his presence is making a difference. So you might be listening to this thinking, man, I messed up, I'm doing this. But if you're present in your child's life, your presence is truly a
wow,
gift and is
bro,
making a
that's so
difference.
good. And
So
I
be
think with that,
encouraged.
we will end it. I really do appreciate you being on, man. It has been a pleasure. I know when I was thinking about this list, I told you before, I was thinking about going solo and just kind of going through the list and just kind of felt my spirit. It was like, hey, get Hummel. And I think it was a God move. It was definitely a God move to bring you on, bro. And I appreciate you being on, man. Yes, sir.
Amen.
So
It's been a privilege.
I'm a
It's been
I'm gonna throw
a
this out
privilege and an
here,
honor
and
for sure.
I'll let you talk about it. But you do have a podcast that you used to record, and it's still live. It's still active. And for people who maybe you're listening to this, you're like, hey, I want to hear some more. He has got some phenomenal interviews. Some great men of God. But what is that podcast, and where can they find it?
So it's Crosstalk with John Hummel. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, pretty much anywhere that you can listen to
Good
podcasts,
stuff.
you can find Crosstalk. So I haven't done a recording since I believe it was this past summer. Had Brother Evan Miller come on and he talked about how he
Bro.
overcame a pornography addiction.
Yeah.
Tremendous,
Yeah.
tremendous
I've
content.
been listening to it off and on here and there, and I know like just some of the content I've come across, just really solid conversations. And yeah, I appreciate the work that you put in. I know things change in life, and we're not always able to pursue things the way we used to. But that chapter of your life, I think it's probably going to impact people further than what you know. So, but yeah, again, thank you for being a part of this, bro. And God
Amen.
bless. And we will see you all next time. We're going to continue this series on fatherhood. And just continue with book reviews and interviews and conversations. So stay tuned. If you are listening to this and you made it to the end, I want to say thank you. And also, if you made it to the end and you feel like that somebody that could benefit from this, share it with them, send it to them. Just be like, hey, let this encourage you. And I pray that it does and that God blesses. We'll see you guys next time. Bro, thank you so much, man.
Amen.